Xi Jinping, a biography, written by Zhong Wen. Chapter 10 Tyranny and Crisis. Xi Jinping exploits the peasants to maintain his rule. In Ningbo, an acre of land is expropriated from the peasants and the peasants are given 10,000 yuan to sell to the developers for 500,000 yuan, and so the government and the developers make a net profit of 490,000 yuan per acre. If 100 million mu, that's 49 trillion, what a resource. The Institute of Sociology of the Academy of Social Sciences did a survey. Migrant workers are paid 10,000 yuan wages, but the output of GDP is 25,000, the difference of 15,000 is what? A professor from the Central Party School said, "Is this 15,000 surplus labor?" He said yes, it is depriving the peasants. In 2020, China will receive 8.4 trillion renminbi from land sales, accounting for 44% of national revenue, 40% in 2019, and 84% of local revenue. All are by violent demolitions and forced relocation, acquiring peasant land and ultimately deprive them of their land. Forced evictions are a major tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist government receives a large amount of land revenue from the demolition of houses. Land selling has become a major source of local finance, called land finance. Land finance accounts for more than 20% of government revenue, and a large part of the revenue from land sales is used for the government's image projects to show the Communist Party's great, glorious, correct performance with new local construction and to maintain the legitimacy of the regime. Part of the revenue from land sales is transferred to the small treasury of each province, which is a collective embezzlement to be shared with the local top government officers. A small percentage is embezzled by the departments and personnel who happen to handle it. After the Chinese New Year in 2014, Xi Jinping made a hypocritical visit to Nanluo Pot Alley in Beijing, saying that he would respect the legitimate rights and interests of the evicted people and put on a veneer of good governance and love for the people. But the brutal evictions in 2014 were worse than the evictions of 2013, and the methods were even more brutal. And the scale of demolition was also bigger. According to information released by the Ministry of Land and Resources, the revenue from land sales in 2013 was 4.1 trillion yuan, much higher than the 315 million yuan in 2011, and in January 2014, the revenue from land sales in Beijing alone exceeded 7 times that of the same period in 2013. The revenue from land sales in Beijing, Shanghai, and Hangzhou exceeded 100 billion yuan, continuing to drive the national land sales market higher. The reliance on land finance is even deeper in various places. Government-sanctioned and government-led forced and hasty demolitions in various places have caused numerous tragic cases. On March 21, 2014, at 2 a.m. one villager was killed and 3 injured when a tent in Du Jiaotong village, Fengtai Street, Pingde City, Shandong Province, was raised and set on fire. The local government claimed it was a fire, but it was actually an arson attack by village official Du Kunshan, who gathered Wang Yuefu and others to set the fire. After his release from prison, Wang Yuefu repeatedly threatened and intimidated evicted families, threw firecrackers to create explosions, smashed windows and doors with an axe, and harassed and assaulted the villagers. On December 27, 2014, an AIDS demolition team, consisting of 6 people living with HIV, were formed in Nanyang, Hunan Province, by a government-approved developer. The AIDS demolition team threatened residents to infect you if you don't move out, and set off firecrackers in the middle of the night to scare them. On July 16, 2014, outside the China Youth Daily in Beijing, 7 middle-aged men and women, by taking poison, fell on the ground foaming at the mouth and committed suicide. 7 people from Sihong, Jiangsu Province, who had petitioned for compensation for demolition and relocation in 2013, were forcibly repatriated by the government and put in a black jail. They felt desperate and escaped to Beijing to take medicine to commit suicide. On January 15, 2014, the demolition of the West Street village in Baoxiang County, Hebei Province, caused the Feng Wenji couple to self-immolate in front of the forced demolition construction team. They got seriously burnt and Feng Wenji died on the 23rd and his wife went to the intensive care unit. On November 19, 2014, the owner of a farm in the village of Songxia Town, Changle City, Fujian, poured gasoline on his body before the construction team indulged in the forced demolition. He ignited a fire and rushed towards the construction workers and the village director was held and burnt. On January 7, 2014, Li Dongdong, a villager from Huan village in Pizhou, Jiangsu province, was stabbed to death for stopping the forced illegal occupation of land. Hundreds of villagers stopped the forced construction and clashed with the construction team and another villager, Li Weinan, was stabbed and seriously injured. On October 14, 2014, a fierce clash between villagers and hundreds of demolition-armed construction workers in the rich village of Jining, Kunming, resulted in 6 deaths on the construction site, 2 deaths occurred among villagers, and a total of 8 injuries on both sides. On July 28, 2014, a court in Weifang, Shandong Province, sentenced Ding Hanzhong, a 53-year-old villager a death penalty because he had hacked 2 demolition workers as to death with a sickle in a clash with several demolition workers on September 25, 2013, a tragic case that has been banned by the Chinese Communist Party. The above examples are from the demolition cases recorded in 2014 by a law firm in Beijing that specializes in litigating for demolition families. There are many millions of similar cases of forced demolition, black demolition and blood demolition in China. Many people have been displaced by the brutal demolition and they have nowhere to complain about their grievances. Some of them have petitioned for redressal. The Chinese Communist Party has always shirked its responsibilities towards petitioners and many of those who petitioned in Beijing had no way to seek redressal and were left on the streets. Most of the provinces took the petitioners back to their places of origin and digested them locally, leaving them with no place to live, no means of livelihood and on the streets. On November 5, 2018, hundreds of pneumoconiosis workers went to the Shenzhen government for 3 days in a row to demand compensation. Early in the morning of August 17, 2018, the government of Nantong, Jiangsu province, led a 200-strong demolition team to forcibly demolish 3 residential houses in a storm, 2 of which were for people like Zhang Wugong with disabilities who was nearly 80 years old and had been hemiplegic for more than 20 years. In the early morning of October 30, 2018, dozens of forced construction teams in Harbin's Songbei district sealed doors and blocked roads to forcibly demolish the residential home of the disabled Zhang Taihua family. They dumped soil and rocks on Zhang's family to force them to move out. The Harbin visitors who rushed to the scene accused the forced eviction as despicable behavior. They were injured by the construction team who deliberately reversed the car to beat up the Zhang family. On October 28, 2018, 10 old workers from Sinuhe City, Jiangxi Province's Wollastonite group, representing more than 150 retired homeless households, petitioned in Beijing and at 2 a.m. And on the 29th, the Beijing General Security Bureau barged into their residence, violently twisted them into the car, punched and kicked them. Zhou Yongzhen, an old man, was beaten up and had several incisors and taken back to Jiangxi. A petitioner from Hebei, Hunan province, was escorted to his hometown and his escort stabbed him to death on the way home. Many of the petitioners who were living on the streets of Beijing did not want to be repatriated and had nowhere to spend the night and so they found some cardboard boxes and slept on the streets of Daxing County, forming a petition village and surviving by begging. In November 2017 a bizarre fire broke out at midnight in Beijing's Daxing County in the affordable rental house in Jiufu Park in which 19 people were pronounced dead officially but actually more than 40 had been burned to death according to popular rumors. After the Daxing fire tragedy, Beijing CCP head Kai Chi quickly deployed the city's major cleanup and remedy operations to demolish illegal buildings. From November 21, the city mobilized a forced relocation team composed of police, urban management, etc. to launch a 40-day investigation and cleanup operations. They cut power and water supply. All the small shops, small workshops, households, etc. which were classified into the scope of relocation and demolition were cleaned up within 3 days. In less than a week, hundreds of thousands of people were displaced from the city's districts and counties. They were dragged out with their bags on the streets in the cold and were left in dismay to find another way to live. Many people suspect that the government authorities were intentionally creating fires. In order to build the gorgeous red capital demanded by Xi Jinping, government authorities organized and premeditated the expulsion of the lower-class outsiders, the low-end population, from Beijing by using the pretext of eliminating fire hazards. The displaced nannies, cleaners, vendors and small stores were needed by low- and middle-income households in Beijing, and they were only living on the edge of the city, invisible to foreigners and tourists. Some estimates predict that the government got rid of 3 million people to clean up Beijing. In November 2018, Ding Kehui, a low-end person in Yan, Sichuan province, was evicted from Beijing's Daxing County, who went to the Daxing government to petition because he suspected that tens of thousands of dollars of items in his rented house would be taken away by the local village committee. The local police station didn't care but arrested and detained him. The government has been forced to demolish many newspaper kiosks in Beijing's urban areas, including the subway entrance and street kiosks. 72 kiosks with business licenses were demolished around August 1, 2014 in Chaoyang district, and some kiosk owners had physical confrontations with the demolition police. Many eviction victims and other victims of injustice have sought lawyers to redress their grievances in court. The Xi Jinping government is so displeased with human rights lawyers that it has turned them into enemies and persecuted them in an organized manner. In 2015, the 709 arrests of human rights lawyers occurred, in which 286 lawyers were arrested in 27 provinces nationwide in the early hours of July 9 by the Public Security Bureau. Wang Yu, a prominent human rights lawyer in Beijing, and her husband Bao Longjun, a lawyer, and 16-year-old son Bao Zhuishuan disappeared one after another at 4 a.m. on July 9, 2015. There were more than 20 police officers surrounding the building where Wang Yu lived under the pretext of arresting him for drug use. Wang Yu was arrested and his whereabouts became unknown. On July 10, 2015, all 4 members of Beijing Fengrui law firm were forcibly taken away by unknown people one after another, and their whereabouts became unknown. Many law firms were raided, and the Beijing authorities unjustifiably revoked the licenses of many law firms to practice law. Many lawyers were sentenced to 3, 4, 7 and up to 7.5 years in prison on the fabricated charges of subversion of state power, and this Red Scare has continued to this day, and some lawyers are still in prison. The U.S. Department of State issued a statement as recently as July 12, 2015, expressing alarm at the systematic detention by Chinese police authorities of people defending the rights of others in a peaceful manner. The United States strongly urged the Chinese government to respect civil rights and to release all those detained who protected human rights. German Deputy Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel met several dissidents during his November 2016 visit to China. He called on the Chinese government to release detained human rights lawyers. German Chancellor Angela Merkel met 2 detained lawyers during her visit to China in May 2018 and accepted a letter from the wife of one of the lawyers. The British Embassy in Beijing stated on July 17, 2015 that the British government fully supported the EU's statement on the recent human rights developments in China. August 8, 2016, the British Embassy issued a statement on the EU's response to charges of subversion of state power against lawyers in major countries. On August 8, 2016, the British Embassy issued a statement on the EU statement on lawyers charged with subversion of state power, expressing strong support for the Chinese lawyers. The CCP persecutes religion and claims to be atheistic. The CCP only recognizes Marx as God, and they want to see Marx when die. Later Mao Zedong, Red Sun, was added. The CCP sees Mao God as the Sun God. The CCP cannot ban all folk faiths, so they allow several major religions to exist from the surface. But all religions have to wear a big hat on their heads, patriotism. The CCP does not distinguish between party and state. Patriotism is love of the party. Love of the party used to be love of Mao Zedong and now add love of Xi Jinping. The Communist Party wants to control everything and is in charge of everything. The CCP controls religion. Religion is under the control of the United Front Work Department. Christianity believes in God, and the United Front Work Department adds, Party, Xi Jinping, to God. If the church is not patriotic to the CCP, it is not legal, and one can only hold worship and preaching activities in secret. The Chinese Communist Party has been cracking down on Christians, Catholics and Muslims, who do not love the party and disobey the leadership of the United Front Work Department. The CCP tore down crosses erected by Christians and Catholics, harassing religious activities of the faithful, arresting church pastors and restricting the free activities of the faithful. On April 2, 2020, Zhao Huaguo, the pastor of the Burt's Family Church in Sili County, Hunan Province, was arrested on the false charges of inciting subversion of the government. 22 Christians were detained at the Maoming City Detention Center in Guangdong Province in October 2018. Guangzhou rights lawyer Fan Bioan was granted access to meet them at Maoming City Detention Center No. 1 only a month later, but the meeting was too short to get more details. In October 2018, Fujian Christian Church was continuously harassed and suppressed by the government. Water and electricity were cut off for 10 days and city police were continuously sent to storm the church to threaten believers. The church leader was forcibly taken to the police station for interrogation while he was hospitalized for heart disease. On November 4, 2018, when 700 members of the Evangelical Church of Chengdu met for worship, undercover police showed up to monitor them. On the 5th, a group of 7 people from the Communist Party's Religious Bureau, State Security, and the community came to the home of evangelist Jiang Tian and tried to force him to sign documents from the religious department, which Jiang Tian steadfastly refused. He also asked for audio and video recordings of the meeting but was also refused. A believer was fired from his workplace for believing in Christ. In September 2018, Pastor Zhang Ganghua of Changsha Mars Church signed a statement of support for the Christian faith. Mars Church was then subjected to a series of government harassment. In October the church door sign was smashed, the authorities sent someone to the door and questioned Pastor Zhang Ganghua for 4 hours. The church door lock was broken. On November 11, the Religious Affairs Bureau officials came to the door claiming to ban the church. The police brutally and forcibly took away 3 believers and injured 1 person. The church called the police several times but the case was not accepted. On November 25, 2018, a Christian house church in Zhengzhou University City was stormed by more than 10 Religious Bureau officials. There were only 10 or so believers there that day before it was finally banned and seized. It is estimated that there are currently 100 million believers in God scattered throughout mainland China. Most of them are church house members who are not tolerated by the Chinese Communist authorities. They continue to meet and practice their religion despite constant harassment and persecution. The CCP's greatest success with religion has been the privatization and commercialization of Buddhism. The Buddhist monks at the top of Buddhist temples have mostly accepted the Communist Party's religious administration. The CCP's Religious Affairs Bureau allows and encourages wealthy businessmen to conspire with monks and abbots to invest in Buddhist monasteries from which religious officials also receive benefits. Senior monks and abbots can become millionaires, have girlfriends and get married. Religious officials ask monks and nuns to pledge their allegiance to the CCP. The Buddhist monks and nuns can dance in disco and the loyalty dance. The CCP has corrupted the senior members of Buddhist temples who are wearing Buddhist clothes, while the majority of lower-level Buddhists still adhere to their Buddhist beliefs. The Chinese Communist Party's persecution of pro-democracy activists has had a major impact on the international community, as it did on Liu Xiaobo, who won the Nobel Peace Prize and died in prison of a terminal illness. Liu Xiaobo was a doctoral lecturer at Beijing Normal University, a writer, and a social activist who led the drafting of Charter 08 in 2008 and was arrested and imprisoned in 2009. Since Xi Jinping came to power in 2013, Liu Xiaobo's liver cancer had been worsening in prison and the Xi regime had denied his medical parole since June 2017. It was only when he was about to die in prison that he was granted medical parole under false pretenses. Liu Xiaobo died a month after entering Shenyang Hospital at the age of 61. His body was then cremated and his ashes scattered in the sea. His Peace Prize was never received. Another typical example of the CCP's persecution of pro-democracy activists is the long-term persecution of Qin Yongmin, a pro-democracy activist of worker origin. Qin Yongmin was a Wuhan worker who insisted in the late 1970s that people should have the basic human rights of expression, publication, association, etc. He had been summoned, monitored, and detained by the CCP regime for years. From the 1970s to 2012, he was arrested and detained 39 times in 43 years and spent 23 years in prison, making him the longest-standing political prisoner in China since the Deng Xiaoping era. Since Xi Jinping took power in 2013, the persecution of Qin Yongmin was intensified, and in January 2015 he was placed in administrative detention at Wuhan Detention Center No. 2 for giving too many interviews to foreign media and writing too many articles, and his wife Xiao Suli was subsequently detained and was made to disappear. In June 2016, Qin Yongmin was indicted by the Wuhan Procuratorate for allegedly inciting subversion of state power. According to the indictment, Qin Yongmin has organized and planned a series of subversive activities to achieve his political goals of pluralistic democracy, writing articles and publishing books and proposing reconciliation, human rights supremacy, benign interaction and peaceful transformation for all people. On July 11, 2018, the 3.5-year prosecution of Qin Yongmin was extended by the Wuhan Intermediate Court to 13 years in prison for subversion of state power, without giving a detailed account of the case and the reasons for the verdict. Qin Yongmin was born in 1953 and sentenced to another 13 years, which meant he would stay in prison until he was 78 years old. Thus he had no chance of coming out alive. After his release from prison in 2010, Qin Yongmin was invited to visit abroad several times, but he said he wanted to stick to the front line of human rights activities and would never go abroad until China was democratized. While in prison before 2010, the deputy director of the Hubei provincial prison also approached him about going abroad, but he refused to agree to the authorities' conditions and refused to go abroad. In response to Qin Yongmin's resentencing to another 13 years, the EU and Amnesty International both issued condemnations. The EU's July 11, 2018 statement stated, "The situation of civil rights in China has deteriorated and a number of Chinese human rights defenders are being convicted and imprisoned." Xi Jinping's comprehensive and thorough crackdown on speech that does not heed Xi's words has led to the suspension of the publication of Yanhuang Chuanqiu, which was supported by a group of the CCP patriarchs, including military generals, in July 2016. Founded by 92-year-old veteran Du Guozheng, Yanhuang Chuanqiu has a history of 25 years and has published a large number of reflections on the historical mistakes of the CCP, which are very popular among all walks of life. But Xi Jinping only allows the publication of positive energy that he approves of, not the articles reflecting on historical mistakes. The article is not allowed to be published. The Yanhuang Spring and Autumn could not survive even with Xi Zhongshuan's "well done" inscription in the past. On the one hand, Xi Jinping has intensified his tyranny, forcibly demolished and relocated millions of people, and a large number of peasants have been unable to survive and have petitioned and repeatedly been mercilessly persecuted, while on the other hand, he has hypocritically implemented his poverty alleviation and poverty eradication plan and implemented fake poverty eradication throughout the country. In March 2021, he also held a celebratory conference in Beijing to announce that China has successfully eradicated poverty, China has won the battle against poverty, created a miracle on earth, and created a Chinese sample for global poverty eradication. Xi Jinping has announced 98.99 million rural poor people are all out of poverty, 832 poor counties are all off the cap of poverty, 12.8 poor villages are all off the poverty line. Ironically, in May 2020, Premier Li Keqiang has said that China has 600 million low and middle-income people, whose average income is less than 1,000 yuan per month, and that the 90 million people Xi Jinping has said are poor, are actually not out of line with the UN's absolute poverty line of $1.90 per day. The Sichuan provincial government just announced in 2020 that the urban and rural low-income guarantee standard in Ping'an County was 590 renminbi per person per month for towns and 390 renminbi for farmers. In reality, till today, a large number of poor farmers only earn 200 to 300 renminbi per month. Xi Jinping's regime has to support 80 million oversized officials and heavy military expenses plus heavy stability maintenance expenses. The top and bottom and widespread corruption, swallowing the fruits of the people's work, domestic ostentation to engage in cosmetic projects, image projects, foreign big spending, a bottomless pit, generally low wages and high taxes, is the main reason for the poverty of the people. Although China has become the second largest economy, the proportion of poor people is still quite large. In 2019, the economist Lang Xianping made statistics, add up the wages of all people in the country, except for the total economic GDP of a country. Europe is the highest, is 55%, South America 38%, Southeast Asia Philippines Thailand, etc. 28%, the Middle East Iran, etc. 25%, African countries 20% or less, China 8%. This shows how deeply the Xi regime has deprived the people. How can it not cause massive poverty? The collusion between Xi Jinping's regime and the black and evil forces in society has created a black deterioration at the grassroots level in the violent demolition and relocation, which has also triggered violent resistance from some people and deepened the social crisis. As early as 2015, an open letter signed by a group of staunch communists was circulated in China demanding that the central government should remove Xi Jinping as general secretary, which set off an anti-Xi undercurrent. The open letter pointed out 5 major mistakes of Xi Jinping, including his cult of individual worship, abolishing collective leadership, brutally suppressing human rights lawyers and making enemies abroad. Hong Kong business owner Li Ka-shing, who was sensitive to Xi Jinping's change of face since he took power, began to deploy investment withdrawal from the mainland in 2015. This has caused the party media, Global Times, to crusade against Li Ka-shing ran away. In response to Xi Jinping's retrograde and evil policies, many CCP officials are demoralized and negligent, and there is a rising trend of official suicides. In 2016, Zhu Tiezhi, deputy editor-in-chief of the official journal of the CCP Central Committees, Tsui, hanged himself. Under Xi Jinping's perverse administration, the morality of mainland society has deteriorated, having a large number of fake goods, drugs, tobacco and alcohol, education, contracts, news, achievements, false claims and other, conscienceless, corruption. We thus see a deepening social crisis. Xi Jinping is unpopular. He did not dare to face the local people every time he went out. The male and female police officers pretended to be the masses to create a welcoming scene. In a photo published by Xinhua News Agency in August 2018 of Xi Jinping's visit to Anhui to inspect the flooding, netizens discovered that the woman holding a child to greet Xi was Yan Jing, deputy chief of the Funing County Public Security Bureau. This kind of staging and fake performance is the world's first fake public show-off under Xi Jinping's evil administration.